Hey everybody, welcome back to the K2N Online Paddle School. We are back here on YouTube, and this week we're spending some time breaking down what we're supposed to be doing with our wrists through the paddle stroke. It's really common, especially with people that don't have any coaching or are brand new to paddling, to overuse their wrists as they try to go through paddle strokes. Becoming adept at paddling is using your whole body to go through the motion, but when we're learning, it is a lot easier to just use our shoulders, elbows, and our wrists to try and complete the motion. When we are only using a smaller number of joints, the urgency to try and use these limited joints to try and help more rises. But at the same time, there are some nuances with wrist position as we go through the stroke that can give you a little extra boost and a little bit better leverage as you complete the stroke. So we'll talk about the bottom hand, the top hand for both the canoe and the kayak, and go over some of the things that we're looking for and try to dispel some of the misunderstandings that go into wrist position. So the bottom hand is one of the simplest ones. When we are interacting with the water and going through our pulling phase, having the wrist in a neutral position is ideal. When looking at the wrist, we have wrist flexion, where the knuckles roll away from us, and then we have wrist extension, where the knuckles roll towards us. A neutral grip would be where the knuckles and the wrist are level with each other in the front. So now when I turn my hand to the side and I go through a pulling motion, I want to try and minimize flexion and extension at the wrist, and I want to try and keep this firm and neutral. So when we have a pulling mechanism with the hand, we are just trying to connect all of the motion of the body through the arm. The moment that the wrist starts to bend one way or the other, we have a little bit of a power connection loss, right? Now we are relying on these stretched muscles to try and transfer that energy, as opposed to just having isometrically held muscles to transfer energy. So this is a common one with new paddlers. When they have a lot of force on their bottom hand as they go through the pulling motion, if they do not turn their body and pull using their legs, their hips, and their shoulders, now pulling at the elbow is insufficient. So the body is always trying to help, right? We are trying to find ways to make it easier and try to sustain and distribute that workload through as many joints as we can instinctually. So as we get to this point, you will see paddlers trying to yank at their wrist in order to try and help with this pulling motion. Working in a gym setting for a number of years, when you have people do a bent over row, they reach down and they grab a dumbbell. As the weight increases, disproportionate to the amount of experience that they have, you will always see them try to bend at the wrist as they pull that weight towards them. This is the same characteristic that we see on the water. As we introduce more and more load, you will see these joints start to break more and more, and it's attempting to try and pull more effectively. The byproduct is you don't pull any more effectively. You're actually much less efficient than trying to keep all of these joints stabilized and pulling with the whole body. So for the canoe stroke, especially when we are using a canoe paddle, as we pull it straight back towards us, keeping this wrist neutral is key as we're interacting with the water. Where this starts to get a little tricky is as the blade leaves the water, there is a level of finesse that we can introduce by bending at the wrist to turn the paddle in order to feather it. Feathering is allowing the edge of the blade to cut through the air with a minimal amount of resistance versus having the blade pushing this way. All of this surface area is going to push forward and you are going to find more resistance in the air. So getting to the point of an exit, now you start to turn at the wrist in order to feather. So this is where it trips people up, because they know that at some point they want to bend the wrist, but the timing begins to work against them. If the blade is still in the water and I start to bend my wrist to begin this feathering process, I am now twisting this water under me, and now I'm going to run into these very inefficient moments. Overuse on the elbow and the wrist from bending while it's under load, this is a big problem. But once the blade is in the air, you can bend at the wrist and there's no resistance on the blade anymore, right? So you're able to balance this feathering motion if you can get the timing perfect. So with the kayak paddle, the leverages and angles start to change. Instead of pulling the paddle straight towards us, if we're using a wing blade, the blade travels away from us. On this axis, it changes some of the rules associated with the bottom wrist. The same principle, when we are in this power phase and grabbing water, having this wrist unbroken and neutral gives us the most transfer of energy. But while the blade is still in the water as the elbow is lifting to remove it, you can also bend at the wrist to further accelerate how quickly you exit from the water. So this is one where you will see a lot of high-level paddlers use their wrists to give them a little extra push off the end of the stroke. And this is something to keep in mind and to try out on your own. If you do it and you feel that your forearms are getting really tight and it's not working for you, it's something that you can refer back to in the future as you start to clean up your movement. The same idea, there is a subtle moment where you can bend at the wrist as you're starting to exit to give you just a little extra push off as the blade leaves the water. So the next one we're going to look at is going to be the top wrist position as we are using a canoe paddle and then looking at it with the kayak paddle. So one of the reasons for this video, besides it being a YouTube comment, is I was doing a lesson with somebody and they mentioned that if your wrist is broken, your transfer of energy is more limited. And there are moments where that is correct, especially in a pulling mechanic, right? Anytime we pull any amount of large weight, the wrist being neutral is advantageous. A deadlift, a pull-up, a bent over row. There's a lot of exercises we can heavily load with this wrist being neutral. Looking at the top hand on the canoe paddle, there's a misunderstanding of how we want to push into this handle. It is very common for paddlers to roll their knuckles over the top and to push down in this orientation as they go through the stroke. But when you watch high-level paddlers, they will roll their knuckles back and they are going to push their palm into the top handle in this orientation away from them, as opposed to pushing straight down exclusively. And so when we look at the top hand being a pushing function, we can now look at exercises like a push-up, or the bench press, or a single hand press. All of these motions feature wrist extension, where we tilt the knuckles back towards us and push through our palm. One of the reasons for this is it maximizes the surface area that you can use with your hand, right? So if you were to bench press and roll your knuckles up and away from you, it is much harder because you have much less surface area. This is the same idea here with the paddle. If I roll my knuckles back, I can interact with all of the back of the paddle here. And if I roll my knuckles over the top, I can only interact with the top. If I roll my knuckles back, I can get my fingers over the top, covering the same distance, and I get all the extra surface in the back. Now when I push with this hand, I have much more force that I can produce because of that increased surface area. The other idea is as we go through, we want to transfer our energy through the palm as it goes through our forearm here. If I tilt my hand forward, if I'm truly doing a pushing exercise, that energy now has to go through the bones and muscles of my hand, which is dramatically weaker than just pushing right into a very sturdy surface, your palm. The perception of having to keep this neutral as you take strokes messes up paddlers a lot. They can't use their top arm in the proper function, and the pathing of their stroke immediately goes negative as they push down into it. If you can roll back your knuckles, your ability to hold on to your positive blade angle for longer is present, and you still get the benefits of pushing downward throughout the stroke that you're looking for. You just get to maximize it because of your wrist position. As most paddlers will complete the stroke, somewhere between the start and the end of the stroke, the wrist will go neutral. It will start in extension and it will slightly go forward as you complete the stroke here. So it's not something that you're trying to consciously whip forward and push. It just kind of naturally pushes down as your body goes through this motion. What's happening is the angle that you're pushing into the paddle is changing. When you start the stroke, the paddle is going a little bit more forward. As you get into the middle of the stroke and your shoulders turn and you start to push down, now this angle is changing and your wrist position will also change with it naturally. So the primary thing is to just think about rolling the top knuckles back, and pushing into the paddle. If you continue to turn, the rest of it will reveal itself naturally. So with kayaking, again, because the angle starts to change, we don't really have to go into that same wrist extension that a canoe paddle has to in order to get the same leverages. Because we're coming in a little bit more to the side, a little bit more horizontally, you can keep this hand much more neutral. But even then, I wouldn't say that it's perfectly neutral. Many paddlers roll their knuckles back ever so slightly as they go into the stroke in order to get more positive blade angle. If I push my knuckles forward, I lose a little bit of this leverage. So don't be afraid to have these knuckles rolled back a little bit as you go into the motion. So anywhere between neutral and slightly back is an advantage. It's the same idea. We're looking to maximize the surface area that we're pushing into the paddle. So make sure that your hand is gripping into the paddle and you're pushing with as much surface area as you can as you go through this motion. If I push my wrist into flexion as I go through this, now I don't have surface area on the part of the paddle that I need to push forward. I only have surface area on the opposite side of the paddle. So the only thing guiding the paddle is now my bottom hand. So making sure that we are in a position of moving this wrist around until we can feel that pressure on the backside of the paddle gives us a pushing force that we're looking for throughout the stroke. If I go through it incorrectly, it's much harder to feel that, and I have to rely on my bottom hand to do most of the work. Finding whatever is comfortable for you based on the angle of attack that you're going through is the key to maximizing both hands and your whole body effectively. Excellent. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. Again, this video came from a YouTube comment, so if you have any ideas or things that you would like to see discussed in detail, feel free to leave a comment. We'll make a video on it. If you need any more in-depth help, check out the K2NOnlinePaddleSchool.com today. We have over 300 videos on the website that are designed to help you systematically go through the stroke in every little detail, from your wrists to your elbow, to your shoulders, to your thoracic spine, to your lumbar spine, to your hips, to your knees, to your ankles. Every joint is accounted for. Every phase of the stroke is accounted for. The goal is to make sure that you understand what you're trying to achieve and then making yourself do it. Big shout out to all of our YouTube members. We had to reconfigure the board to make room for more names. I'm probably gonna have to get a larger board, or I'm gonna have to write in a smaller font. Thank you all so much for the ongoing support. It is $2.99 a month. You get to see these videos an entire month early. It's only a small perk, but it goes a long way in helping grow and build this channel. 55 YouTube members, it means a lot to me, and helping K2N stay here on YouTube. There is still time this summer if you would like to book a camp or a clinic in your area. If you can provide the group, I will fly up and teach everybody in your area whatever discipline that you're interested in. Steering a dragon boat, steering an OC6, paddling a dragon boat, paddling an OC6, paddling in surf skis, paddling an OC1, team paddling dynamics, long distance racing, short distance sprints, whatever it is, I can try to help facilitate and bring a little bit more insight into the paddlers in your area. So if you'd like to book some sort of group session, feel free to send me an email found in the description of this video. Thank you all so much for the ongoing support, and we'll see you all next week for our next paddle tip video.